Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and thank you for joining us here on another edition of the most audacious podcast you'll find on the internet. Thank you. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day and joining us here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping you live your best audacious life ever. As always, I would encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram under the handle The Audacious Pod. And then if you head over to Facebook and you search The Audacious Living Podcast, you'll find us there as well. And if you are watching on YouTube, then you know that you can subscribe to our YouTube channel simply by tapping the notification bell down below, and you'll be immediately connected and receive all instant notifications. So lots of great ways to stay connected with us, and I'd encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, share. Let's do what we can to keep this audacious conversation flowing. Now, on this episode of the podcast, we'll be talking about the importance of staying undaunted in the face of adversity. Now, if you look up the dictionary definition of what undaunted means, you'll learn that it's an adjective, undismayed, not discouraged, not forced to abandon purpose or effort. You see, when you're undaunted, you're staying focused on your goal, and you're not letting anything derail or sidetrack you from going to where you're meant to be. Undaunted is also the title of Kara Goldin's book. Actually, the full title is Undaunted. I've got it right here. Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. And if you haven't heard of Kara Goldin, she is the founder and CEO of Hint. Now, Hint is a water company that was founded in 2010 and today is valued at $150 million. It's got a national presence and chains right across North America. Whole Food, Target, they do incredible work online in the online space, and it's just so fitting that Kara would title her book Undaunted, considering the fact that she started her own company. She did so not knowing anything about the unsweetened fruit-flavored water market. She just didn't know. She had to dive in, she had to learn, she had to encounter problems, figure out solutions, ask questions, and essentially what she was doing was staying undaunted. So Kara's here. She's going to touch on her journey and give us lots and lots of great insights. Certainly she's targeting entrepreneurs, but what we'll learn quickly is many of the things that she talked about can be implemented in our own personal lives. So sit back and enjoy this conversation with Kara Goldin. Every good podcast, you do an official countdown. So I'm going to go 3, 2, and 1. Thank you, Kara, for being here on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's such a treat to chat with you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a little while, so I'm glad that you're here today with me.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yes, very much so. I'm excited as well. And I actually kind of want to start, not really the end, but sort of, I guess it's at the end, because there's one thing that stands out about you to me that I've just been so impressed with, and it's your sharing. You spend a lot of time sharing with entrepreneurs. You teach your lessons, articles I've seen, your book Undaunted. You spend a lot of time, passing along lessons. And I want to start where that drive from you. Where did that originate from, or what made you be as committed as you are to this mission of sharing?
Oh, it's interesting. Well, being the last of 5 kids, I think I was a sponge. I laugh because now my 4th child is a lot like me in some ways, different than me in many ways, but a lot like me in that he's, when you pick up on all these stories, I think I was also great at at sort of determining whether or not they were telling a fib along the way. My older brothers and sisters, I'd be like, oh, come on, you know, like mom and dad will never believe this one. And I think that it started there, but it also started, my father was actually an entrepreneur, I think, at heart. He worked for a large company called ConAgra that was, he had developed a product line called Healthy Choice. And it's interesting because he was one of the first brands that I saw that was actually sharing stories. And it was people asked him along the way, like, why were you sharing on those original boxes? I mean, this is in the 1970s. No one was
unheard
doing
of.
it.
Unheard of.
And Healthy Choice, if you go back and look at sort of early advertising and early design, and today, I mean, everybody's sharing their story. I mean, how do you differentiate yourself? You share your story. I mean, he was doing that in a time when it was, you know, not popular to do that. Other brands were not doing that. And I think just, you know, he would talk to me about the fishermen for the shrimp that were getting the shrimp for these Healthy Choice dinners. And I mean, you know, as a kid, you're just holding your head and you're like, if I have to hear about the shrimp fishermen one more time, I think I'm just going to lose it. But I think it really started with that. But I also think that sharing and storytelling is often a way to catch people up to how you got to this point. Right. And instead of, oftentimes, if you just say, this is the way I am, or, you know, this is what we're going to do, versus saying, okay, I have been thinking about this and I want to, you know, do this because I've never been able to do it. So I've always been able to share in that way, I think, more to catch people up. But I think a lot of people sort of come into situations where, you know, they'll just say, well, this is just the way it is. And even my parents would say to me, you know, no, you're not going to be able to do this. And I'd say, oh, come on. And as my dad would say, you know, Kara, the problem with you is that when I say no, you actually don't hear no. You think, well, maybe I can get him there at some point. And when I say, when I say maybe, you're like, all right, I got him now. He's not, I got him, right? And so I think that it's just, when you share a story and people understand your why and your passion and your the importance of something to you too, you have a greater chance of bringing them in and wanting to be helpful, wanting to be a part of it. And whether that's consumers, investors, your dad, you know, whatever that is, teammates, you know, that's the way that you get people there.
You know, it's really sometimes easy to think that people just kind of arrive, and we don't ever arrive. There is a journey, there is a story. And so by bringing people along, they're able to see and understand, you know, what the journey truly is about. Because if you do, then and then through that process, I'm preparing, I can say, okay, is this a path that I want to take, or I can take, or is this something that I really want to do? So again, and I've always been a big proponent of sharing. I think there's so much value in that, from just motivational, inspiring other people, encouraging, giving strength. All of these things are key when we talk about sharing.
Absolutely. And I think too, you know, it's interesting. I think the one thing that I learned about writing my book, a lot of people over the years, I would share some of my stories and they'd say, okay, when's the book coming out? And, you know, you kind of laugh, haha, you know, and then I started journaling about 6 years ago when I was out sharing my story in different conferences and keynotes, etc. And I found that oftentimes I would leave the room, I would leave the event, and I would think, oh, there's that other story. And I would take the time to actually write those stories down. And by actually reviewing your own stories, whether you're writing them out or you're just thinking about them, you start to think about why they're important to you, and
Yes.
what do you feel
Yes.
others could actually, benefit from these stories, whether that's to inspire them and motivate them, or actually educate them
Teach.
in some
Yeah.
way, right? And to teach. And so I started writing out this journal, and after a few years it was over 600 pages, and that's when I thought, I didn't actually even think about, oh, I'm going to go write a book now, or
Right.
this is the preview to the book. It was when I went to a friend of mine who's authored a few books,
Yep.
totally different novels, more things. She said, I said, how do I actually publish my journal and get it out there to people? I wasn't even thinking about it
Yep.
as a book. And she said, you mean author a book? And I said, oh,
guess so.
I don't have time for that. I mean,
Right.
I'm not an author. I'm an executive. I mean,
Right.
where would I find the time to do this?
Right.
And so she was the one that actually said to me, maybe you actually, I think you have a book there. And she took a look and said, maybe you have 2 books here. I mean, this is crazy how many writings are in there. And my motivation for actually getting it out in to not only to entrepreneurs, but also to people who have never thought about them being an entrepreneur, or maybe they don't understand those crazy entrepreneurs, or they think that they're, fearless risk takers, or that, they just, they were born lucky, or whatever it is. I wanted to kind of explain my own journey, how, I didn't, people have said it, were you born an entrepreneur? Who knows, right? And I think more than anything, it allows you to kind of look back on maybe these little traits along the way that can kind of be helpful to you to sort of sketch out for other people going forward, or people who are thinking, maybe, people have said to them forever and ever, you just go out and try all the time. And maybe that's the thing that you have to look at and say, but how many times have you tried and things actually work out? Or maybe you try and you think, nothing ever happens for me. I'm always failing. I'm always, the one that loses, or whatever it is. What do you learn about yourself along the way that helps you to define what you enjoy?
Yep. Well, it's funny, the learning piece, Kara, I think that's a big one, because so for those who are naturally inclined to try, they will try, and even if they're not successful, they're not necessarily viewing it as a failure. They're saying, oh, what can I take from it? What can I learn from it, and how do I do it differently? So even in those situations, there's still lessons to be gained from those individuals.
Totally. And I think that is the most important thing. And it was in many ways therapeutic for me. And I think that I think also too, once you've been through something, it maybe it seems a little daunting, or it seemed like it was never going to end. It was the worst thing that ever happened to you. What you realize is that the sun rises again tomorrow. Right. And you start to figure out, I should have done things this way, or, if I ever get another opportunity to do something, I'll do it this way, or I'm focusing on people that don't understand me to go and raise money. And, maybe instead I should be looking at another route, or maybe I should be listening to podcasts that kind of help me with something that I think I'd like to be good at, but I'm not very good at. And so I think it really is just kind of having a, introspective on yourself, just by being able to kind of dig in. And, so often people think that storytelling is for other people. And yes, I totally think that catch people up to where you're at and all those things. But I think oftentimes stories actually can help you to know sort of what you've been through, and maybe to celebrate. Oh gosh, I did get through that. Wow. I remember that feeling that I had early on, that I was finished. This was not going to happen, or, that is something that I think is so key.
It's so easy to lose sight of your wins sometimes in the midst of stuff. And I think having these reminders of what you've done, I'm big on celebrating our wins and celebrating successes and reminding yourself sort of what, the great things that we've accomplished. And so
Totally.
I'm with you wholeheartedly. I want to, so I'm going to go back. So, this podcast, it's the Audacious Living podcast. And I remember specifically the day I sort of sat down and said, I want to do a podcast and I don't know what to call it. And the word sort of audacious is sort of, it resonated with me, and it caused me to kind of reflect on my life. And one of the things I had thought about was, every aspect, every major success or accomplishment, this aspect of audaciousness existed. And it was like eureka when I landed on it. I'm wondering, when you landed on Undaunted, what was that process like for you?
For the book.
For the book, yes.
Yeah, for the book. So it's funny. I even turned in my manuscript and I didn't have a name for the book.
Oh, wow.
And and I had, a handful of names for the book, and it wasn't Undaunted. And it was, relentless,
right,
and resilient. And it was interesting how it just kind of came to me once I started bringing it all together and going back and rereading it. And we were actually blocking the book, it's called, where, you're putting the words onto the page and making sure that they're fitting. And there's, a whole system that the publishers have to do that. And we were making room for different quotes on the page. And as I started going back and really reading it and visually seeing kind of what I had written, that was when I just said, holy moly, like this is like, there were times when I really thought I was done, right? That this was going to be finished, but I instead lived undaunted. And then I thought, oh, that's so interesting. I mean, that's exactly, you think you put so much pressure on yourself to actually come up with the title of a book versus, and it's the same with branding. I mean, it's the exact same story around branding. I mean, people have said to me for years, like, Hint, the company that I run and founded, is such a great name. Like, how did you come up with that name? And I'm like, the company was supposed to be called Wawa. And in my mind, I'd been thinking, Wawa, here's why it's a great name. And my husband was from the East Coast. I was from the West Coast. He started laughing. He said, don't call it Wawa. He was like, you'll never get it trademarked. If you ever get big, they'll sue you. I mean, a million different reasons. And then it was when I was asked and almost forced to kind of think on the fly of another name. That's when I came up with Hint. And it's funny because, I mean, I think that that's not the only way people do things, but I think it's very clearly the way that I end up coming up with, names, I guess, was just, after I thought it was going to be one thing, then I'm flexible. I change my mind and I say, nope, that's what it's going to be.
Got you. So I wonder if you could just describe, just to our listeners, when we talk about Undaunted, what do you want them to resonate with? What do you want to resonate with them, and as they think about what Undaunted means?
Well, I think living undaunted is a decision, and it's one that is it's very conscious, and it's something that you have to decide that you're going to go and do this, because every day we have stuff that gets thrown into our life that seems hard, that seems like it's not what we should be doing, that we're not going to be able to be capable of it. I certainly have had those moments where, I not only have my own doubts about whether or not I can accomplish something, but maybe other people do too. And, being a tech executive and then coming into this world of creating my own beverage. I mean, living in Silicon Valley, certainly not the most popular thing or expected thing that anybody wanted me to do.
Right.
But instead, what I said was that here's my why. This is why I want to go and do this. And I'm not going to allow the walls to get up too high or stop me from going out and doing what I want to do. And Undaunted, like I said, it doesn't just, I don't think that just comes to you. I think that you have to be very, very conscious, because when you're surrounded by even family and friends who are well-intended and say, you shouldn't go start a podcast. What are you doing a podcast? You could do this, but you wanted to do it for for a lot of reasons, right? You could storytell around to them to why you wanted to do it, and maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't get it. But at the end of the day, you've got to put a stake in the ground to go out and do what you're going to do. And find your own why. And so I think that is the big message that I want to get out to people. It doesn't just, people aren't born undaunted. Most that I know of. I think that they put stakes in the ground and they say, nope, I'm going to go do this. And maybe in some ways you're going to be a little selfish, right? You're going to say, no, this is my life. I was born into it just like you were. And I'm going to go figure this stuff out because I'm curious about it. I believe I can have impact. I believe that if I do something, I can help a lot of other people, whatever the situation is. But don't wait for it. Go out and figure out how you get the message out there.
Got you. As you talk about the why, it's so, having that why is so important, because as you said, when obstacles come in our paths, we remain focused on why we're doing what we're doing. So the obstacles, they're not even necessarily obstacles. They're not, they're deterrents or irritants or annoyances maybe, but they're not actually stopping us. And so as you were going through that journey of establishing again, in a new beverage company, in a new realm for you, you probably faced a fair amount of obstacles, but it was that why that kept you going, wasn't it?
Totally. And sometimes, people said, well, it's hard to be undaunted when you've got people saying no to you. When you've got people telling you that you're surrounded by maybe just those family and friends who are sharing that they think this is a bad idea, or you shouldn't go take the risk to go and do this. And, they may be right. But I think if you think that you can go accomplish something and you keep thinking about it and you know that it's a good idea, that I think that is the key thing, that you've got to go out and do it. And I think that it's not necessarily the least lonely place that you can be, though, either, because when you're living in the space by yourself, oftentimes, and maybe you're the only one, you're doing a startup, you had an idea, you don't have any money to go and start it, but you want to kind of see if you can't get some traction out there. I mean, it's hard to be an entrepreneur. And that was the other piece that I really wanted to get out to people, and something I share when I'm in talks, especially on college campuses. It's just, it's a choice to be an entrepreneur. And there are many more entrepreneurs that have failures, especially once they hit a success, than actually not. And I think that sharing that, if you're ready to hear a lot of no's, if you're ready and willing to bet it, that you're going to be able to go out and achieve something, then entrepreneurism is great. If you believe that you can make some kind of change, if you believe that you can make some kind of impact on people's lives. But if you're doing it just because you think, like, I think being an entrepreneur is really cool and I'm going to go make $1 billion, chances are it's not going to happen. Right. And I think that is important to get out there as well.
Right. Kara, talk to me about having big, lofty goals and the importance of that. In your case, you wanted America to fall in love with water. When you're on that journey, how about shooting for as high as you possibly can, right? And sometimes people don't want to, because like, what if I miss it? Well, it's not a bad thing. I want to sort of talk about why that is so important.
I think for me, I felt like I grew up being pretty healthy, and I was in sports. I, drank my diet soda, Diet Coke in particular, for years and years, thinking I was doing good. But over the years, I felt like the world caught up with me, and and decided that my body couldn't adapt to what I was putting into my system. And so I kept thinking, oh, I should probably exercise more. I was running a ton. I was having some knee issues, so that was starting. But so I felt like that might not be the answer. It might be what I was eating. But then when I went in and looked at everything that I was eating, I was actually eating pretty healthy. I remember my doctor saying to me when I said, I got to lose some weight and I don't know how to do that. This was after child number 3. I have 4 kids.
Yep.
And I counted calories. I did all of the things that you're supposed to do, and nothing was working. And that's when I looked at that one thing that I had been doing forever, was drink this diet soda. And I thought, it's crazy to me that there's so many people, including me, who are smart, who think that they have it all figured out. And diet for me had been it was a positive word. I looked for it. I looked because I wanted health and better. When I decided to test this idea of giving up diet soda for plain water, lots of amazing things happened. My skin cleared up, my energy levels went up, I lost weight almost overnight. I mean, it was insane. But I started to really think about, first of all, I wouldn't be able to maintain drinking water all the time because it was so darn boring. So I had to figure that out by slicing up fruit in my kitchen and throwing it in the water. But the other thing that I thought is that there's so many people that are fooled by these words. And in fact, every time, you have to remember, I was taking a little break from working. So I didn't have a lot of adults around me. Maybe at the park with my kids, I was like talking to people when I could. But when I was going out to dinner with people and to have a somewhat intelligent conversation, I would bring up this topic of words like diet or friends of mine were drinking vitamin water. That was not my drink, but they were drinking it. And I thought, I wonder if they know that drink, there wasn't even a diet version of it at the time. It had more calories in it than a can of Coke.
Wow.
Yet people excuse that, even the people that were counting calories, because it had vitamins in it. And so I thought, what are those words that really mess people up? Diet messed me up. Vitamin, low fat. When you look at all of these words, and I'm sure there's more of them. I thought, are they really getting people what they think? Are they getting people to their goal of health? Call health, great, lose weight, great skin, no more type 2 diabetes, or whatever the health issue is. Is it really helping them to get there? Or instead, do people feel like it's not them, it's not the products, it's me? It's me. And I think that I really wanted to kind of reboot this idea, thinking I wasn't born this way. I had acquired this situation. So could it actually be something that has jumped into my life over the years that is actually screwing up me? And people would be like, some people would be like, oh, this is really heavy. I mean, this is a super interesting concept. And maybe addiction is even, wiped in there as well in some way. But I thought that if I can actually not sit there and, yell this conversation to everybody instead, why don't I just test it by getting a great product out there that doesn't have sweeteners in it and see if my hypothesis is true. And that was what I was doing, because I thought nothing's more annoying than people saying, here's what I think, and then they just leave it at that.
It doesn't go nowhere.
Right. But I guess it's always, the curious ones, right? The ones that think and people are curious about a lot of things, but
Mhm.
there's some people that are curious and then have ideas on how to fix something,
Mhm.
right? The guy that developed, as my husband was talking about this weekend, spackle, right?
Okay.
I mean, somebody just came up with this idea. I'm sure he's, doing something in his house.
Yep.
It was
Yep.
it was a guy, by the way, and he's
Okay.
like, if there was just this,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And then he just decided to go do it.
Yeah.
And it all starts with this curiosity,
Yes.
and then the execution
Right.
on that curiosity.
Yes. Well, again, the word spackle. I mean, that whole exercise of coming up with that must have been fun in general. But no, you're absolutely right. The curiosity has to be there. The ability to ask questions, to be inquisitive, to not settle, Kara. Like, I mean, when you're faced with obstacles, and I know throughout your book you talked a lot about asking questions when you were confronted with something and you didn't have the answer, or it wasn't readily available to you, you ask questions. And I think that's a really important aspect of when you sort of talk about curiosity. Question asking is key as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's another thing that I've thought about too, that I was humbled.
Mhm.
I was willing to sort of show my vulnerability, because
Yeah.
I actually did have a backup plan. I could always go back into tech,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I could walk into the beverage industry and think, I'm never going to accomplish something, or I tried and it didn't work, or whatever. But instead, I just thought that the only way I'm actually going to even attempt to be able to figure out whether or not I can be successful is to actually ask questions,
Yeah.
try different things along the way. And it's funny because when you jump from one industry to another industry, people, they don't know who you are, or sort of what your job
That's
is
right. That's
at
right.
this form. So here I was in tech. I mean, I was I was the youngest vice president at America Online, one of the few women at that level
Right.
when I was there. And so people knew who I was in tech for direct to consumer. I ran the direct to
Sure.
consumer partnerships and at AOL. And yet I walked into the beverage industry and I'm asking questions of bottlers and co-packers like, so why do you have to use a preservative in your product?
Right.
And again, like people who are not in that industry, I didn't work at Coke or Pepsi or a beverage company before. So I was just asking a
Right.
question.
Yeah.
And so many people who were actually co-packing these products, they'd say, I have no idea. I just do what I'm told. And I would think, aren't you curious about why you're putting so much stuff in there? And people would be like, I just never really thought about it. I just do every single day. And there are people that do
Yes. Yeah.
every single day. And oftentimes, even people who are high level executives within an industry, within a company, they never thought about the why or
Questions. Yeah.
change
Yeah.
or right. And they're on the
It was
hamster
working,
wheel.
right? It was
Right.
working.
There's working.
Why
And
change?
they're getting paid, and
Yep.
and everything, the stock price is up, everything seems to like work.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I think that it's for me coming into a different industry, people would say, well, were you working at Coke or Pepsi before? I'm like, no, I worked at America Online. They're like, they don't have a beverage. And I'm like, I know. And they said, what did you do there? Well, I did. Okay. Anyway, I don't understand what that is, but like, I don't know the answer to your question. And so a lot of people would just say, I don't have time to answer
Right.
your question because
Right.
I don't think you're going to make it because you didn't come from this
You come
industry.
from Coke.
Right. And so the odds,
Mm.
they were taking a chance on me, I guess, if they had a conversation with me and maybe I didn't spark their curiosity enough
Right.
by sharing why I wanted to do this. But then there were a few people who said, I've wondered about that too. And if you find the answer out, let me know. So sometimes if you ask these questions,
Yep.
you start finding your people who are also
Mm.
interested
Yes.
in coming and sharing the puzzle with you and trying to figure out, well, that piece worked together and didn't work together. And you kind of laugh when you see him and you say, nope, I never figured that one out either, but we're still working on it. It just makes life more fun and more interesting to be able to kind of think about that and do that. But yeah, I think that it's I think more than anything else, not being in an industry or sharing your vulnerability that you're curious about it, it's just not what people do. I think instead people want to be smart, right? They want to walk in and say, I got it all together. Right? Unless you're taking like a high school exam, then you're like, oh my God, right? I really don't have it together. Right. But I think that it's just showing people that you're not maybe the most knowledgeable in the room about something. You actually end up gaining, I think, a lot more. And in fact, today, as I've thought about, kind of where I get inspiration and where I get educated along the way, I don't tend to go to like food and beverage conferences still to this day. Sometimes I'm speaking at them and I enjoy it. And I've met a lot of people in the industry along the way, but it was really kind of going outside of the box to kind of try and figure out a problem. Like even when we decided to bring direct to consumer into our business in 2012, I had been in direct to consumer, but more on the partnership side and not on actual, like, how do I build it myself? How do I deal with supply chain and, all of those elements that are needed in a D2C. And I think I just felt like if I would go more for like, what problem, why am I going there? Not just because it's my industry and I want to, go and figure it out, but instead I wanted to go up to a place that I thought had fixed something, had been thinking about it before my industry. And maybe I could bring that over into my business.
Understood. No, understood. It's as you're talking, I'm just thinking about, and just the different challenges that we encounter, and at times where being vulnerable is almost an asset because we need to figure out how we get through this issue or obstacle or whatever. And so I think the sooner that we're comfortable with that and we can embrace it, not as a bad thing, drop the judgments behind and say it's okay, then the better it is and quicker we can get through whatever challenge we have in front of us. Right. So I want to read an excerpt from your book, Undaunted. It was something, as I read it, it jumped out at me. And so I just want to get your thoughts on this, please. As you said, just as I'd done with everything, I had to figure out the best growth path as we went along. That meant asking questions, learning, trying new things, learning from mistakes, and leveraging successes, and proceeding undaunted against incredibly unfavorable odds. That for me, when I sort of summarize all the work that the messages that you're putting out and wanting people to resonate, that resonates with me. And so it really was. In fact, I went back a couple of times and read that again and said, yeah, like that's a mic drop. Like that's it right there. I wonder if you sort of could touch on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think that there's so many quotes in this book that are more life quotes, and there's so many stories that can go along with each of these quotes too. But I think more than anything, as I think about that quote in particular, I think about, there's always going to be challenges along the way. You can always think about why you're not as much as maybe you wanted to be, or you didn't do something right, or maybe you don't have the right education, or the right gender, or the right color skin, or whatever that is that you think like that's going to help you in some way to be more successful. I've always thought too, especially in my journey around Hint, is like, if we allow those things to block us and not actually do what we are trying to get out there and do, then they win.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have to instead figure out, how do we move forward? How do we actually not allow that to prevent us from doing whatever we want to achieve? And, as I've talked a lot about, complacency. Well, that's probably something that I'm most afraid of, that the minute that you stop, and the minute that doesn't mean you don't slow down, but the minute that you're stuck, the minute that you stop, and that's it, game over. Right. And so you have to try and figure out, well, what about this? What about this? And you have to constantly be thinking about, even if you don't know how to achieve something, can you do something that will actually keep you moving, keep you thinking? And so that is what that quote in particular is very much about. And hopefully that will inspire people to just go out and try. Don't stop. That again, that doesn't mean you can't slow down.
No.
That doesn't mean
And
that
that's
you can't
fine.
be thoughtful about something, but sometimes you have to re-strategize. I find whenever you feel really stuck, and we've all felt that way. But you have to re-strategize. You have to, I often find too, when I feel stuck, that I get into a mode of, maybe blaming a little bit as well. And blaming never really helps you get moving. It just makes you angry and eats you up.
That's right.
Right. And there can even be some moments where, you agree to disagree, and you cut ties or whatever. And along the way, maybe, you think that you should have been, on the football team, and it just didn't happen. Right. But at some point you just move on for bigger and better opportunities. And then maybe you go back and look at those times and think about how you felt about those times where you were cheated, ripped off, whatever. And you think, I don't even think I liked that. I don't even think I really enjoyed that. Or in one case that I talk about in the book, we were in Starbucks, and, we got booted out of Starbucks after, we were achieving all of our goals for sales in Starbucks. And it was a big hit to us. We had millions of dollars of inventory. And I remember a friend saying to me one day, she's like, you were in Starbucks for a year and a half. I mean, anyone who goes to Starbucks, it's probably like a habit. They go every day. I mean, maybe they were picking up hint, but I mean, it was kind of trial more than anything else. I mean, you got the trial out there. Now they want to go buy a case somewhere or whatever. And so I wouldn't, really worry about it. And I remember thinking why I cared. Number one, I had all this inventory that was going to go bad, that I was going to have to eat. And that was millions of dollars. And I was going to look foolish to my investors, that I was going to have to, tell them that I had counted on this, and that in some way I didn't see exactly what was going to happen. But the other really, really key thing, and I couldn't see this until probably almost a year later, was that, and really why I cared, was it was 40% of our overall business, and 40% of our business could go away overnight.
Right.
And so again, sometimes you can't see when you're in a situation. I, hated Howard Schultz. I hated everybody at Starbucks. Like now I go back and I think about, I never will put my company into a situation where we rely on one source of revenue for 40% of our business that can sink us. I mean, it's just like, that was an incredible lesson and an expensive lesson. And ultimately, I figured out what to do with the inventory. I was racking my brain trying to think, okay, what can I do? Where can I go with this inventory quickly? And I all of a sudden I get this email from Amazon, and they were launching a grocery program, and they needed a truckload of product immediately. And the guy said, by the way, I buy your product every morning at my local Starbucks. And I with my latte. And I thought, do I tell him that we've been kicked out of Starbucks? Maybe he'll think that our product's terrible and he won't want to actually put it in. He never asked. So I said, oh, that's terrific.
Yep.
And then I said, wire me the money so that you get a truckload of product and you can sell it on Amazon. And we became one of the number one products in grocery almost immediately when Amazon was just starting this business or really kicking into gear on this business. And it was at that moment that the Amazon getting so in with Amazon, that's when I realized that there was a key element that was missing in our business. And that was this place where customers could go where every single one of our flavors was on our site. And we had an email, because if you sell through Amazon, it's just like selling through Whole Foods or Target or whatever, where you're not going to get the emails. And so it was a moment when I remember like driving my car after this conversation with the Amazon buyer, and he wasn't going to give us the emails. And he said, does Whole Foods or Target or anybody else give you emails? And I said, no, but you're an online company. And he said, it doesn't matter. He said, does Starbucks give you emails? And I thought, well, we were kicked out of Starbucks, and maybe that would have been helpful if I would have had the emails, from a business that I was, whatever. But it was, so in some ways I thank Starbucks for making me not be complacent, that I had been on my own little hamster wheel, looking at my data every day and thinking, I'm rocking it.
Feeling good about yourself.
You're feeling good. But that's the time when you should start to be a little more comfortable to go out and innovate and disrupt and do things a little differently.
No, it's easy to get complacent when things are working nicely and you've laid out your plan and everything's falling into place, and you get caught in that. And sometimes we kind of need to get forced or pushed to think outside of the box or do things differently, or even persevere past that, whatever the situation is. And I think ironically enough, I think persevere was the longest chapter in your book too, which clearly meant there was the messaging around why that was an important one for you.
Totally. And I think it's like, it's also, you have to be able to do, what you love and what you believe in, because being an entrepreneur is really hard and really tough. And unless you actually just decide and commit to it, and if you don't love what you do, then, don't do it. There's way better options, easier ways to make money, to go out and pick something that you're curious about, that you feel like you can have impact in some way too. So that's the big message I was trying to get across.
One of the pieces I love about the Hint story is that it doesn't just stop where you stop. It goes beyond that. You get involved with social issues, and whether deodorant, sunscreen, other aspects. A social consciousness piece is clearly evident in the work that Hint does, and it's clear that it shows an evolution of the company. And I think, again, going back to the comment we just made about complacency, right? It's really easy to be complacent in what you're doing because it's working and it's giving you the returns and the dividends and all the things that you want. But to go beyond that and to push the boundaries and to try new things, I just think that's a phenomenal, even life lesson that we can take, not just in our organizations, but in our day-to-day living.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to appreciating life. And I think so much of the time, I don't think we're meant to evolve. Right. And that doesn't mean just getting taller and, maybe bigger in some way. It really, it means that we are here to move further. And I think that sometimes we just need to remind ourselves about that. It doesn't stop when you stop going to school, right? You have to find opportunities where you're going to go learn. And again, it could be a work opportunity. You don't have to go start your own company. You just have to want to continue doing that. And I think so often, I don't know, call it laziness or call it, you've got too many people around you that are telling you can't. And after a while, those voices they get to you because they they team up with that one inside of your head that actually is always a little there and always a little bit nervous. But I think it's such an important aspect that we all just need to be just aware of, that it doesn't stop when, we're getting done with school and being told you need to go learn something. It just means that we have to be our own teacher. We have to be our own advocate.
Yes.
We have to keep, raising the bar, pushing the line out, right? And getting ourselves to do these things. And I do believe too, that people who actually call it challenge themselves in that way, they really are the happiest, because they're looking forward to something, right? They don't know if it's going to work. Right. But I think that that's when I find the people that are the most interesting and truly the happiest, they're the ones that don't feel and don't describe their life as stuck.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And I often, say to people, I sadly meet people who have, risen in the ranks and all different industries as C-suite executives. And I think that there are many of them where, money or sort of title, or they're just not, that's a badge to them. That's great. But the key thing is really challenging themselves and continuing to learn. And I think it really is kind of the keys to the kingdom, frankly, for so many, that they just haven't figured out, that's really interesting that's, that I can't really say the last time I was challenged.
Right.
And I think it's something that everybody should really think about at all age and all levels.
Yeah. So on that, I'm assuming a question that you get asked often is then, so what's next? What's the next challenge? What does that look like?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know. I continuing to challenge myself every day with trying to grow our business. And also, I don't have 4 young kids anymore, but I have 4. I have 2 in college, 1 in graduate school, and one in high school. And I think more than anything, I'm trying to inspire them to actually live undaunted and not be focused or think that, it's just like picking a major in college to me. I mean, I remember how many, like, you put all that focus on. I was a journalism major. I thought I wanted to do something in writing and journalism. And I was a minor in finance. So I was going to map these 2 things together. It sounded great. And then when I tried it, it didn't work. But then I got into this other avenue, which ended up good. And then that expanded into lots of other, areas as well. And I think that the thing is, how do you keep building the house with the bricks, right? How do you keep adding on where you're just never really done? And I think, whether that's through other products, I think one thing I look around a lot at, which I always did, even back in the beginning when, I was starting a new category, and maybe many of these stores didn't really understand what the heck I was talking about. I'd say it's an unsweetened flavored water, and they'd say, "What's it sweetened with?" And I'm like, "Are you listening?" But they just had never seen, they weren't caught up to where I was at. And so finding your people, right? Finding your base. Who are you? Who was counting on you? I think is the thing that they'll inspire you back. Right. And I think that that's the thing that I'm constantly trying to spend more time there. And I still go into stores. I still, during the pandemic, I was stocking shelves and helping the team. And, I think it's as you grow and as you get bigger in your business, I think don't allow yourself to disconnect from the consumer who's actually making your brand and your company. And and I think most leaders would say, like, when they lost sight of what the consumer wanted, that's where you fall. Right. And so I think that I'll end it there. Like, I think that that's where that is really where we continue going in the future. And again, that never stops.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't stop, and nor should it. Life is an ongoing process, and I think when we think we arrived is when we really should thinking about what else can be done, and constantly asking yourself that question, Karen, like, what else can I do? What else is to be done? What else can I learn? Who else can I help? All important questions to ask. And so I thank you for touching on that point. And thank you for being here. This has just been a phenomenal conversation, a great chat. And, as we think about whether being undaunted or being audacious, I think these are key aspects to how we can live our lives. And by doing that, making a difference to those that we touch within our sphere of influence. So again, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, and congratulations on all the success.
Thank you so much. This was tons of fun.
Yes, it absolutely was. And for our listeners who want to catch up with you or learn more about the Hint or yourself, where can we send them?
Yeah, Kara Goldin on all platforms. My book is called Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, at bookstores, all over airports, actually, if you're flying anywhere soon, and Amazon, of course. And I'd love to hear from everyone. And if you haven't tried Hint yet or didn't know we were available online, definitely pick up a case. We're all over the US and all stores, as well as online as well.
I'm a big fan of the lemon water. I had an opportunity to try that for the first time, and it's a very subtle, but it's a distinct taste, and I enjoyed that. So that's my feedback. I know you like feedback, so I thought I'd share that with you.
I love it. Thank you so much.
All right. Again, Kara, thank you so much for being here. It's an absolute pleasure, and all the best.
Thank you. You too.
Back we are here at the podcast, and again, I want to say thank you to Kara for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time, share your inspiring journey, passing on so many great lessons, and helping entrepreneurs and the rest of us on our way as we continue on our path. Again, her book, it's Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. Absolutely great read. I would encourage you to grab a copy. Kara left us with so much to think about, but if there's just one thing I take from my conversation with her, it would be this. As we go through life, we'll encounter situations that cause us to question ourselves and make us feel that we didn't have enough or didn't do enough to make us successful. If we allow those things to block us from doing what we're meant to do, then they win and we lose. Instead, we have to find ways to not let those things stop us. And above all, we need to keep moving, keep thinking of new ways to get over challenges and obstacles, remain focused, and above all, stay undaunted. Hey, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, I would encourage you to do so by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com. All you've got to do is enter in your email address and you will be immediately connected to all good things audacious living. We've reached the end of another great episode, and so I want to take this opportunity to thank our amazing listeners and supporters. You've been absolutely fantastic. I appreciate all the comments, the messages, the DMs, the likes, all of that. Please keep it coming. I certainly enjoy it, and I want to thank you for your ongoing support. It absolutely is tremendous, and it's the fuel that we keep going. So thank you, and keep it coming. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.